Thank you, John. To Padre, to the representatives of Kapuka, Air Force, Forest Hill, Navy, our Mayor, Greg Conkey, OAM, other council representatives, perhaps most importantly, serving and former personnel, those who've worn our uniform proudly, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Beersheba, picture this, bayonets in hand, eyes true, emu plumes atop, ready to charge, sweat beading, horses fractious, eagerness rising, battle hardened, anticipation high. That was the scene just before the last great cavalry charge in military history. That dashing Great War mounted attack is one of the great moments in Australian history, yet it took place so far, far away. And in the glint of the setting sun off the spurs of those gallant troops and the whirl of dust, it was seemingly over not long after it began, and the victory was secured 104 years ago at dusk on this very day. Generations ago, but something which will live with us and our nation's soul forevermore. It inspired a movie, it inspired books, and it should inspire us to always dig deep, to do the very best we can when the odds seem insurmountable, to be daring, to be desperate, and to never, ever give in. When Tel El Sabah was captured at 1500 hours, the Anzac Mounted Division ordered an attack on the final objective, the Ottoman stronghold of Beersheba. British General Edmund Allenby sent a telegram to the famed Harry Cheval, ordering the capture of Beersheba before nightfall. However, before the telegram reached the Lieutenant General, the 4th Light Horse Brigade was preparing for their mounted attack. Aerial reconnaissance had established the feasibility of such an attack because the trenches stretching across the direction of the charge were not reinforced by barbed wire or horse pits. The brigade assembled behind rising ground 6 kilometres southeast of Beersheba, Palestine, with the 4th Light Horse Regiment on the right, the 12th Light Horse Regiment on the left, and the 11th Light Horse Regiment in reserve. Just think about that. 6 kilometres. That's the distance of nearly 2 Melbourne Cups, at full pelt, across open desert, being shot at the whole time. It would take pluck and luck just to survive, let alone win the day. The 12th Light Horse Regiment Commander Donald Cameron said, "It was clear to me that the job had to be done before dark, so I advised that galloping the place as our only chance. I had some experience of successful mounted surprise attacks on the Boer camps in the South African War." When the possibility of a charge by mounted infantry riding home was raised in the Australian Mounted Division's Preliminary Instruction No. 1, dated 26 October 1917, it suggested the bayonet was equal to the sword as a weapon for mounted attack, if used as a sword for pointing only. The preliminary instruction advised that the bayonet be handheld, since controlling a horse during a charge would be difficult if the bayonet was fixed to the rifle. Divisional armourers were ordered to sharpen all bayonets at once. In these Turk trenches, primarily facing south, with a few shallow trenches facing east, the defenders saw the Light Horsemen charge and opened fire with shrapnel on the 4th and 12th regiments immediately they deployed. You can imagine their surprise. What were these foolhardy Australians thinking? What possibly could they be doing? As the advance became a gallop, the 12th Light Horse Regiment was fired upon continuously. Bullets were ripping everywhere, from all directions. Lieutenant Colonel Murray Bashir, who grew up on farms at Finley and Tocumwal, said this, "I consider that the success was due to the rapidity with which the movement was carried out, owing to the volume of fire brought to bear from the enemy's position by machine guns and rifles. A dismounted attack would have resulted in a much greater number of casualties." It was also noticed that the morale of the enemy was greatly shaken through our troops galloping over his positions, thereby causing his riflemen and machine gunners to lose all control of fire discipline. When the troops came within short range of the trenches, the enemy seemed to direct almost all his fire at the horses. Beersheba received the Distinguished Service Order 5 days later, quote, for the gallant and capable manner in which, as commanding officer of the 4th Light Horse Regiment, he personally directed his regiment into action on the attack at Beersheba on October 31, 1917. This officer displayed skillful handling and magnificent example of courage and determination, and personally accompanied the charge of the reserve squadron. He shot 6 Turks with his revolver and assisted in fighting while still directing his regiment." Unquote. How courageous. New Zealand Mounted Rifles Brigade member James McCarroll described the engagement thus: "A great sight suddenly sprung up on our left. Lines and lines of horsemen moving. The Turks were on the run and the Australian division was after them. We could see the horses jumping the trenches. Dust everywhere. Onwards the light horsemen pressed, surging forward, hacking as they galloped, doing whatever they could to suppress the Turks and capture Beersheba. As the 4th Light Horse Regiment approached the fortifications directly in front of them, their leading squadron jumped the advanced trenches at the gallop, and the main 10-foot deep, that's about 3 metres, 4-foot wide trenches defended by Turk soldiers. The leading squadron then dismounted near some tents and dugouts in the rear, where they were joined by a troop of the 12th Light Horse Regiment. While the led horses were galloped to cover, the troops launched a dismounted attack on the trenches and dugouts, killing between 30 and 40 before the remainder sensibly surrendered. The defenders fought grimly and a considerable number were killed, while 4 Gallipoli veterans were shot dead as they dismounted a few feet from the Ottoman trenches. Eventually, it was all over. The town was captured. A decisive victory was accomplished. Believed to be amongst those on that famous day was Henry Victor, better known as Harry Leonard Sheldrick, also known as Sheldrich, service number 377. Born in Albury in 1877, the eldest of 7 children to Henry and Elizabeth, he gave his address as care of his next of kin, his grandmother, Mrs. Annie Curran of Best Street, Wagga Wagga, not very far from here, when he enlisted on 14 January 1915. He left our shores aboard HMAT A29 Suvik with the 12th Light Horse Regiment B Squadron on 13 June 1915. By the time he returned to Australia on 20 July 1919, he had earned a military medal and the respect of a grateful nation. He married, had a son William, and was employed as a steelworker and shunter at Waratah near Newcastle when he died, aged just 46, on the job on 8 April 1933. Poor Harry collapsed whilst pulling a load of 12 ingot wagons. His bereaved widow, Amelia, said her husband had not been well since the war and felt his death had been caused from the effects of the war. Amelia would live another 44 years, also, how tragically, outliving their son William, who served in the Royal Australian Navy in World War II. We remember Harry today, just as we honour all of those locals, indeed all of those men who slung their rifles over their backs, adjusted their slouch hats, fixed their steely gaze and steered their trusty steeds into danger and deadly fire on that historic day. We give thanks to the 31 of 800 involved in the charge who made the supreme sacrifice and the 171 who fell on the day. We also pay tribute to their mighty horses. What determined animals with such stout hearts. Heroes all, lest we forget.